Good day. Welcome to another edition of Ebima Mungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. Before I continue, I urge you to please press the like button. And if you're new to this show, I also urge you to subscribe. I want to talk about geopolitics a little bit and how technology is very much a part of geopolitics. I wonder where the world will be now if America didn't have all those big aircraft carriers, fighter jets, all those machinery that give America preeminence in the military domain. But over course of time, we keep seeing that this has been a recurring theme because, as you know, I like history a lot. And one of the main defining moments of history was when the Ottoman Turks defeated the last strands of the Byzantine Empire in 1453. Something was very important in helping Mehmed II win that war, and that was the cannon that was shaped and forged by an Hungarian smith. I think he's the one, him and his son. They called that a bomber. It was a really big cannon. It was called the Basilica. It helped them in bridging the wall of Constantinople, a very strong wall that had stood the test of time, and but that particular cannon was very important. We also know what happened to the Chinese. The Chinese didn't want to open up their economy. The Qing dynasty didn't like the fact that Arab merchants and some merchants from Bombay were now beginning to smuggle opium into their country, and then they put a law and said that that shouldn't continue anymore. Well, the East Indian Company, which was the main company that was manufacturing that opium, somehow smuggled a particular ship. That ship was called the Nemesis. That one ship changed history. It defeated the Qing Dynasty Navy and made the British to impose their will on the Chinese. In fact, the British made the Chinese pay reparation for the war that they imposed. But at the end of the day, the Chinese suffered what they call 100 years of humiliation. They had to consume opium. It was forced on them, and their society was now riddled with opium. Anyway, the reason I say this is because this same China now has become a new country where we are seeing lots of technology emerging. It's the Spring Festival in China now, and something very unique happened. China has been celebrating occasions like the new Spring Festival. They call it the Chinese New Year. With they use drone. They have drone shows, and they have so many other shows. But now they also are incorporating robots. This is a show that took place on Chinese national TV for the 60s TV gala. This is a video that just came off now. How true this video is?
AI 技术的快速发展与军用机器人的大量出现，正在深刻改变着未来战争的形态。根据相关报道，
This is definitely signaling the future as we're going to be seeing it soon, where humanoid robots will be very much involved in war. We now see that even the famous dog was incorporated into one of the weapon systems that was displayed during the September 3rd parade by Xi Jinping. The Chinese are very much ahead of everybody in this particular domain. Elon Musk is trying to validate his Optimus. He's working very hard on it. But this is a terrain the Chinese control completely. And we should also remember that the Chinese have one thing they call the low Earth economy, very huge economy now that they dominate. They have drones. Almost all of the drones in the world comes from China. Everybody knows of DJI drones and all. Even if the drones, some parts of the drones are manufactured in theaters of war now in Ukraine and Russia, it's the controllers, the motors and all, and even all the components of it, most of the components of it come off of China. That low Earth economy has now shown us that the drones that were not particularly a part of the warfare, Americans were the ones who did the drones. They tended to focus on the big, huge drones like the MQ Reaper drones, but it's the FPV drones, the Shahid drones, and all these other smaller drones that have now become a veritable part of the war. And the Chinese have now inserted themselves somehow very discreetly into a particular conflict that is about to brew now in the Middle East. Because let's remember one thing. China very much depends on Iran for 1.3 million barrels of oil every day. That's a big amount of money. And they are the ones who consume almost 90% of Iran's oil. For them, Iran is very strategic. Russia has come to provide a lot. Russia is offsetting some of the losses from Venezuela, but this is a trend now. America is trying to impose their will on China in their own little way, their own way, by cutting off supplies of oil to China. One, they've already cut off that of Venezuela. That is despite the almost $50 billion investment that the Chinese are giving to the Venezuelans in helping them to develop their oil industry. That apart now, for many commentators, the Chinese will view the fact that an attack on Russia, I mean on Ukraine, Iran is brewing, it's almost happening now, and it will be an existential threat for them, at least regarding their oil supply. China, though, we should remember, is also trying to get their own oil. And they are now beginning to insert themselves slowly into this war. It may be covert now, but it seems like ultimately it will be, they may throw themselves into this war decisively. And it's their equipment. Their equipment, we already know. We know that they helped in helping the Iranians to develop or to, let's say, crack the codes to the Starlink. They helped them to do that. And now we're also hearing that they're helping to give them radars that will be able to track the stealth fighters and stealth bombers of America. And one particular system that we now hear that the Chinese are giving to the Iranians is the YKJ-1000 hypersonic missile made from low-cost materials, and it is a very deadly weapon. It is one of those weapons that can destroy the aircraft carriers. The Chinese are the ones who are very preeminent in this hypersonic missile technology, and this YKJ-1000 and YJ-25 are now rumored to be very now supplied to the Chinese. The Chinese have been sending in plane load after plane load after plane load of ships to aircraft, big, huge military transport aircraft to the Iranians. They've increased their cooperation, and we already know that they're about to have a joint naval exercise. Russia, China, and Iran will be holding that, and that will be the second one, I think, in the past few months, because they already held one jointly with the South Africans. So the Chinese are now a part of the global world order. I think that if this war explodes, if President Trump doesn't come to a negotiation with the Iranians, then this war gets hot, and somehow maybe the Netanyahu administration is able to convince President Trump to attack Iran, I think that the Chinese will play a much more active role. The last time that the Chinese inserted themselves into a war, the last two times, we would remember the Vietnamese war, the war in Vietnam, and also the war in Korea, where the reality we see today, the division of Korea in the 48 parallel, has a lot to do with the involvement of China in supporting the North Koreans. So the Chinese, even though for the past 30 years, the last war they fought was the one they fought, ironically, a border war with Vietnam in 1979. They've not fought anything recently, but we see that their technology is proven. Many people laughed at the Chinese when they said they had stealth technology, but now we see it. They now have the J-20, and the J-20 is now by far the most mass-produced plane. By 2030, they're already hoping that they will get 30 of such planes, 1,000, I mean, by 2030 of such stealth bombers. They've also now developed their engines. They now have their J-15. They have their W10 engines. These systems and these competencies that the Chinese now have, as they are going to be sharing it, it will make a big difference for the world. And already now we know how the Iranians are posturing. The Iranians are not necessarily bowing and kowtowing to the Americans. The main cross of the matter here now is those things that they want to negotiate about. President Trump has said that, one, he doesn't want the Iranians to continue enrichment. In fact, we are beginning to hear now that they even insist that whatever arrangement they have already done, that 400 kilograms of enriched uranium that they already have, they should send it to a third party. The Russians we hear are already offering to take it. But this is on a day that Aragachi is continuing the negotiations. He met with Witkoff and he met with Jared Kushner, and then he said that they've agreed to a framework on which to continue their discussions. But we know there's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure is coming off of Israel. Israel and the Israeli lobby is very, very strong. And this is the president of Iran talking about these pressures.
سیاست و فتوای مقام معظم رهبری از نظر اعتقادی مهمه. به هیچ وجه به دنبال سلاح هسته‌ای نیستیم. هر گونه بخوان راستی آزمایی بکنن ما آمادگی اینو داریم که این راستی آزمایی اتفاق بیفته. ولی اینکه نتونیم از علم و دانایی برای نجات بیماری‌هامون، صنعتمون، کشاورزیمون استفاده کنیم، اینو قبول نمی‌کنیم. امیدواریم که دنیا اینو بدونه، آمریکا بدونه و شایعات و تبلیغاتی که میکنن ما به دنبال بمب هسته‌ای هستیم رو.
So they have already said for several years now that they have a fatwa that stops them from having the nuclear bomb, but they are insisting that they have a right to enrich uranium because enriched uranium is, if you know radiology, is very much in part of radiology. It's used in medicine, and the last time they stopped enriching uranium, they were cut off of buying those isotopes and those nuclear isotopes that were necessary for their medical needs. So now they decided that they're going to do it by themselves, but the Americans are insisting. Netanyahu is insisting that the Americans should tell them to, one, completely remove their enrichment capacity. They shouldn't even be there. Then two, they should limit their ballistic missiles to 300-kilometer range, and then also to stop supporting Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and also all of the other Shia groups that support Iran. This is what I'll say. Netanyahu will fail. He will not succeed in it. The Iranians want a deal, but it will not be a deal at the expense of their sovereignty. They've shown that, and the Chinese and the Russians are already shipping in a lot of materials. The fact that several attempts to try and crack the Iranians' spirit has not succeeded. After all, there's been one, the attack in June 2025, and then two, the demonstrations that happened, that the Iranians continue to insist that those reactors were MI6, CIA, and Mossad operatives who ignited a riot, and it was actually a regime change operation that led to so many killings in Iran. Anyway, that negotiations that took place in Geneva also involved another party, and that's the Ukrainian and the Russian party. They met in Geneva also with the Americans, and this was the composition of the various delegations that took part in that meeting. The Russians had 6 members, led now by Vladimir Mendelsky, is of the president's office, and this is the former leader of that party, that team, and that is Kostyevko, the head of the main directorate of the Russian general staff. The Ukrainians, though, were also led. I think the leader of the Ukrainians in this particular round of meetings was Budunov, as we were made to. But Rostam Umerov was also there. Akamia has always been part of it. And Hanati, also the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of Ukraine. And Daniel Diskro was in the team with the Americans. He is the head of the U.S. Army, and then Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. So this was the delegation that met, and it was quite an interesting meeting. What we got out of it is they continued. It's a 2-day meeting, so we've not got full readout of it, but we'll get to know the full end of this particular meeting. But generally, what they say is that the meeting was not as cordial. You wouldn't expect it to be cordial. There was deep split. There was deep split, in fact, in the Ukrainian party, because What's happening now is that the Ukrainians, Budinov, has seemed to fallen in line with the CIA narrative, the American narrative. Budinov, we should remember, is very much influenced by the CIA. He was one of the trainees of the CIA that got himself into the presidential office. It's a coup for the CIA. The MI6 had been trying to get Zelensky, the British even got Zelensky to get an ambassadorial position in London. It's so far away from what's happening now, and it's very much. But Budinov was inserted into the presidential office, and he's trying to assert some influence. And this is now beginning to create a problem between him and Yermak. Yermak, the former head of the presidential office, is said to favor a continuation where they will not cede any part of the Ukrainian territory to the Russians. Anyway, one thing though is that Zelensky was not happy. He says that Medeski shouldn't be teaching them about history. We don't have time for all of this. We have to decide. We have to finish this war, and this is not a time for history. But there was a big revelation today. If there are some videos that have been going out now showing the shooting down of some F-16 by F-16s, the shooting down of some Guaranteed drones by F-16s, and it turns out that one big news came off of from an internet site today about who may be flying these F-16s.
Давай, красавчик.
The F-16s have been intercepting Guaranteed and sometimes also missiles. They've been using them to do this, and they've been achieving a lot of successes. But we got information today that one newspaper was alleging that this is Ukraine, United States, U.S., Dutch veterans bolster Ukraine's Air Force F-16 in the skies. So the report is claiming that it's foreign pilots that are now flying these F-16s, that the Ukrainians who were sent abroad to be trained were not necessarily making a good use of their training. They were still lagging behind. And because the war was such a big pressure, the unrelenting waves of Guaranteed drones and KH-101 missiles, cruise missiles, they are within the range of the F-16 to shoot down. And it's important that they shoot them down now, no matter the cost of the Guaranteed drones, because the Guaranteed drones are going to cause significant damage. They may be worth only $55,000, but they are going to be causing damages that are very much bigger. We are seeing now $500 FPV drones are taking out Abrams tank that are $10 million. There's a disparity in the damage capacity of the magnitude of damage that is caused by these drones. So the F-16s have been used, and it's a French intelligence publication, Intelligence Online, revealed that Ukraine is using a secret mix of F-16 squadron over Kiev, which includes Ukrainian pilots and combat veterans from US and Netherlands working on a temporary 6-month contract. Foreign pilots, as reported, are helping to defend Kiev by intercepting Russian cruise missiles and drones, filling the gaps in the experience while Ukraine transitioned to a more modern F-16 platform. This arrangement is described as covert, based on contracts, not on active NATO force, and reflecting deeper involvement of the West in Ukraine's air defense. It will stand to reason. That's not to take anything away from the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are much more trained in Soviet weaponry, the MiG-29s, a very vast amount of MiG-29s. That's where they gained their experience. And they had a lot of problems understanding this particular weapon system. Those people who are pilots and who have flown the F-16 tell you that it takes a long time to master it, 3 years. But the Ukrainians were sent on a crash course, and they were supposed to have been able to master this weapon system. Of course, the first person, one of their aces in their other weapon aircraft, was a casualty when they started flying the F-16s in Ukraine. It was even the Patriot missiles were shooting down the F-16s. and it was just a disaster in the early stages. They've even lost 4 of those F-16, not necessarily in combat, on friendly fire. So this may make sense. We don't we don't really we'll get to know more about it. These are all the things that we'll get to know more about and all. But among all the concessions that are being forced on the Ukraine, President Zelensky has said two things. He said it's not fair that the Americans are putting pressure on Ukraine. We heard how President Trump was saying that Ukraine needs to come to the table or else they need to come or else they will lose a lot. The window of opportunity for them to make a deal is closing and that they will lose a lot. And Zelensky wants that they will never give to the US ceding Donbass to Russia as part of the peace deal. They say it's not fair and they will not do it. But another big news is that Zelensky is insisting that he needs to meet with Putin. The president of Ukraine has instructed his team in Geneva to work on this issue. Axios is the one reporting it. Axios is saying that one of the key agendas of the meeting that they had in Geneva is that they should try and create a framework that will be acceptable to the Russians so that a meeting between President Zelensky and President Putin can take place. According to the Ukrainian leader, the best way to make progress on territorial issues is to have a face-to-face with Putin. Well, this I can say very clearly. Putin has said that he's not going to meet with Zelensky. It will be sort of like legitimizing him. He doesn't recognize Zelensky as the head of the administration, and that if he's meeting with him, he'll be legitimizing him. There's a big problem also in the whole of the Ukrainian polity as regards to how the Russians see them. One, members of the Rada have also had their term expire for a long time. They too have been subsisting and surviving on martial law. And Zelensky himself is now, I think, on his 6th cycle of renewal of the martial law. So this is the little problem, but if he wants to meet with, he keeps insisting. Already we know Yuri Ushakov and Peskov and all the aides to President Putin have said that if he wants such a meeting, he should come to Moscow. That's not going to happen. In that particular meeting in Geneva, some people showed up. Quite the European contingent showed up. The Germans were there. The Britons were there. It was mainly the British that we saw their contingent that was there, led by no less a person than the National Security Advisor to Keir Starmer, was Jonathan Powell. Very powerful delegation were there. And maybe it was a reflection. They were trying to reflect that, create that scenario where when Zelensky was coming to the White House, the whole European political leaders came to support him and sat around President Trump's table like school children. So they went there to go and the gate crashed. The Italians also were there. The French were there, either to make sure that the European point of view is also inserted into whatever peace process that is ongoing. But one person who doesn't want peace at all and who insists that peace will be inimical to the whole of the European Union is the former Finnish Prime Minister, Marin. She believes that Russia will not end this war and that it's not good for anyone to be rewarding the Russians. This is what she's saying.
Make sure that Russia suffers enough. It is time for Europe to pay its own security, and it's time for Europe to boost up its capabilities. We would be fooling ourselves if we as Europe would think that there will be peace that would be maintained if Russia wins. I think that the question of nuclear weapons is something that Europe will have. This discussion will happen. I think it is needed.
So she wants the Europeans to have, as a body, nuclear weapons, and then she also spoke so much about the Russians. She, long before Kaja Kallas got on to the European Union, Sanna Marin was the Finnish prime minister who helped to get Finland into NATO. She pushed that project, and then she got Finland to be part of NATO. At this point, it may be good to put a little history now. We hear a lot from Lavrov. We hear a lot from all of these Russian politicians, even Gerasimov and all. They now talk a lot about Novorossiya. Novorossiya, I should point out, is that part of Russia that used to be part of the Ukraine that used to be part of the Russian Empire. In fact, a lot of countries within that neighborhood used to be part of the Russian Empire. Before I scare anybody, let me just put this map up here now. And this is what a lot of the Russians are now saying that will be the end of the special military operation ultimately. This year are the 4 oblasts they've already taken. They have about quite a lot of ways to go in Zaporozhye. Kherson also, they have some ways to go. Donetsk, they have 20% more to go. Luhansk, they've taken almost 99% of, and they're getting and approaching Zaporozhye city. They've started to move into the Dnipropetrovsk. They've taken some territory there. They've taken some territory in Kharkiv. I should also mention that they are also making some good progress in Sumy, but it's Nikolaev and Odessa that are the big problem. And why would politicians in Poland, in Finland, in all these countries have such strong antipathy against the Russians? Maybe it may just have something to do with this particular image here. This image here shows us something about the Russian Empire. Just like 100 years ago, this used to be the Russian Empire, and this is how extensive it was. It took until the World War I before Poland even became a country, and it took until the 1950s, quite recently though, before Ukraine was made a country. Of course, we remember that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine got their independence in 1991. And somewhere in the 1950s, Khrushchev ceded Crimea to them, and also a large part of this southern part of the Ukraine now that the Russians are now saying that they want to get back for themselves. Well, Lavrov has been saying it. All the Russian politicians these days are now saying it. Some are even daring to say that they will take the whole of the eastern part of the the eastern part of the Dnipro. That may not be necessary, but because one of the things now that is a big problem to the Ukrainians is that the Russians are approaching Zaporizhia, and it's as much as taking Odessa, because if you block access for Zaporizhia to them, to the Black Sea to them means Zaporizhia. If you choke it off, if you start to interdict and start to become a problem for them in that particular region, then that simply means that they can't continue trade in that neighborhood. And already we know that Russia needs to or wants to take Odessa because that's a staging post now, mainly for the British MI6 to do a lot of damage. The drones attack on Russia was unrelenting. They achieved some successes. The Ukrainians achieved success. And they're very strategic successes too. They are hitting columns of refineries, hitting columns of significant chemical plants. There was a wave of over 190 drones. The capacity of the Ukrainians to build these drones is very impressive. They too have stepped up. Already we know they have all the support of all the countries. But it's very clear now that President Trump is not in their corner. It's also very clear that the Russians, slow as they are moving, they are making progress. They are making progress in Konstantinovka. They've even taken the southeastern and southwestern part of Konstantinovka. They've moved in there, and already they are tying up and creating some new problems for the Ukrainians in the Sumy region. So even though the Europeans are saying all of this, they have reason to fear because Macron is in India, and Macron was saying that the Russian army that comes off of the end of the war in a ceasefire will be remobilized and sent to other parts of the front. That will mean Finland, that will mean the Baltic states. Estonia will be very, very vulnerable. Estonia is a small country. They can be easily overrun. And they feel that the adventure will continue because the Russians will not want to absorb all of those trained manpower into their economy. They will need to repurpose them. That's exactly what happened during World War II. After the World War II, Truman had a little problem. He just couldn't decommission the American army just like that. They had to send them into new wars, and that's how the Korean War came about. And there was this very interesting story about how he had 250,000 planes in his hand. Normally, he would have broken those planes up. They didn't need them anymore. The war had ended. They had won the war. But he couldn't do that, and they had to find new wars to move into. Maybe that's what the Russians may do. The Russians are doing very well. Let me put a picture here now. Let's end with one of those drone visuals given us usually by the Rubicon group. Like I said, I tend to get more of the Russian feed in my drone feed in my X feed. I hope somehow, I don't know how to reach out to the Ukrainians so that I can also have theirs too. The Ukrainians are strong mainly on Telegram channel, and I'm not so big on Telegram. But this is a video from the There's just nowhere to hide anymore. They use infrared. They can see whoever you are, and then they can target all the reconnaissance and sabotage groups that go out to try and infiltrate positions. So this is just the way it is now with this war, and this is why you will know that the Chinese will have a very big part to play somehow in the future, because if the Chinese get into this war and they are masters in drones. They may not have fought a war with it, but they are very good with it. Since they have the industrial capacity, it will not be a good thing to go challenging their competence. After all, as at this very moment I'm talking now, the Chinese are building 5 destroyers at the same time in one particular shipyard. They are the America of 1945, by all means now. The China of today is the America of 1945. Anyway, this is where I'll end my video for today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you have any views regarding the opinions I just expressed, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Until my next video, you have a good day.